So, I have come to love the Legend of Heroes series just a lot. I would have to say my favorite entry in the entire franchise is Trails in the Sky 2nd Chapter. It honestly has one of the best JRPG stories that I've ever gotten to experience. But, for all of the good things I can say about it, the game had just one flaw. In order for its writing to really pay off or hit its mark, you first must suffer through a significantly worse game. I am talking, of course, about the earliest entry in the series, Trails in the Sky 1st Chapter. And you may not think that sounds so bad, but seriously, it is. It's boring, the pacing is slow as hell, and honestly, if I hadn't received the game as a birthday gift, I never would have felt any obligation to actually finish it. While I didn't have an angel of mercy to spare me from that terrible 11-month endeavor, you fortunately do.
Rosebud.
Is his sled. It was his sled from when he was a kid. There, I just saved you 2 long, boobless hours.
And now, without further delay, here is everything that you will need to know about 1st Chapter's storyline. So the game begins with Cassius Bright surprising his daughter with the unusual gift of a severely injured boy. It turns out that his name is Joshua and he is one miserable fucking kid. FYI, the biggest mystery of this entire game is trying to figure out just who the hell he is and what all happened to him before Cassius saved him from dying on that fateful day. We then fast forward to 5 years later, when the 2 youngsters have decided that they want to follow in Cassius's footsteps and become bracers. In this universe, bracer is a term for being a mercenary, more or less. But in order to achieve this, the 2 will need to travel all across the country, complete missions, and obtain a letter of recommendation from every single guild branch. Fairly early on in the adventure, our group runs into a young noble lady named Chloe. Joshua starts behaving odd and feels as though he has met her somewhere before a very long time ago. Around the same time, we also learn that the Queen used to have a son, but he died some years back, and now she is without a successor. Since Joshua was gravely injured at the start of the game, I jumped to the conclusion that he is the Queen's son, and has been keeping quiet about his past in order to avoid whoever tried to kill him years before. By the way, I was way off the mark. None of my speculating turned out to be true at all, but for the majority of this game, I stupidly believed this to be canon. I should probably take a moment to talk about some of the other supporting characters as well. First up is Sherazard. She's an old childhood friend of our 2 protagonists, and helps to support them throughout their journey, kind of like a guardian or big sister. She's also a raging alcoholic. Next we have Olivier. He becomes more important in future games, but for these first few, he's mostly just comic relief. The best characters for me tend to be on the villain side, but Olivier is easily my favorite of the protagonists. There is this running joke where Shara keeps drinking him under the table and getting him so hungover. He never fucking learns, and the joke only keeps getting funnier over time. Agant is another important one. In this game, he's a total dick. Always throwing his rank around, talking down to trainees, and kicking Estelle and Joshua off of jobs that he doesn't think they're qualified to do.
Hey, I'm in charge of this investigation.
Not anymore, you're not.
But that's not fair.
Is so!
He becomes more likable in the sequel, but for the duration of this game, he's a complete and total asshole, and I really hated running into that jerk. The Professor, while non-playable, is a character you are going to be seeing a lot of. He ended up being my most hated character in this entire game, because he is so boring. And to make matters worse, every time you turn around, he is always right there. He tends to be really long-winded and prattles on and on about ancient ruins and old legends that I don't understand or even fucking care about.
Ugh, this guy.
I forgot how much he sucked!
And lastly, we have Louvet. While he isn't all that important in this game, he's integral to the plot of the sequel. I think the purpose of him being in this game is just to embed him into your mind and start raising questions about his motives as to set the stage for second chapter. He also bullies a got, which earned him a lot of cool points from me. It was nice to see someone give that jerk a taste of his own medicine for a change. Louvet can be a little hard to figure out. On one hand, we see him doing generic bad guy stuff, like attacking and abducting members of the royal family. But then on the other hand, when a local orphanage went up in flames, Louvet ran inside and saved all the children from burning to death. He sort of reminds me of Jin from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. As the story progresses, Estelle begins to develop romantic feelings for Joshua. But given that he's her adopted brother, she stays in complete denial about it for some time. And as she struggles to accept these emotions, it comes off a lot like this scene from Joe Dirt.
She's your sister, dude. She's gotta be, and you made out with her, man. What's wrong with you, you pervert? Well, I didn't know she was my sister when I kissed her, so it's not my fault. And she's one of the hottest girls on the planet. You just said your sister's hot. What a freak. You're going to hell, man.
Over time, Joshua starts to pick up on the weird vibes Estelle is throwing his way and asks what's wrong. And although she doesn't have the courage to tell him now, the two make a promise that when their journey ends, she will let him know what's been on her mind and he will finally reveal the secrets of his past. Another big mystery this game tries to set up is that people are losing their minds, where they become violent and then have no memory of the crimes they committed. It heavily implies that someone is either drugging or hypnotizing them on the sidelines. However, I didn't have any hope in hell of solving this mystery, because the main plot also sidetracked me with just so much other shit. Between Cassius Bright going missing, a murderous money-laundering mayor trying to kill a bunch of orphans, some mysterious black object that shuts down the power of anything that goes near it, a terrorist attack on a factory, the mysterious black object being stolen, multiple kidnappings, breaking into a military fortress, a martial arts tournament, an attack on the royal family, and fighting evil fucking robots, that honestly, I lost track of that whole mind control thing. After all of that bullshit is over and done with, it's finally time for our two heroes to make good on that promise. Joshua will confess that he is actually the Queen's son, just like I thought, and Estelle will tell him that she's in love with him. Then they'll get married and rule the kingdom together or whatever. But this happens instead. Estelle runs off to buy some ice cream, and the professor walks by to say hello to Joshua. However, Joshua calls him out as the culprit behind all of those mind control events and to cut the bullshit. Just as requested, he drops the whole nice act and then restores all of Joshua's repressed memories. Sickened and shocked by the sudden influx of graphic mental imagery, Joshua collapses to the ground. The professor explains that his real name is Georg Wiseman, and that for the past 5 years, he has kept Joshua under hypnosis and has been using him to spy on Cassius Bright. Because of all of the useful information Joshua unknowingly provided over the years, the society that he once belonged to has decided to let Joshua go free, but he's also permitted to rejoin them if he wants to. Before walking off, Wiseman reminds Joshua about what a monster he truly is, and that living with a kind family like the Brights is just too good for someone like him. So the question on my mind, what exactly were the foreshadow points leading up to all of this? Surely the game must have thrown us at least a few hints somewhere along the way. Well, let's take a look. We first met the professor atop Esmelis Tower. Shortly after, Joshua started feeling really sick. I'm not going to berate myself too badly for this one, since honestly, I just thought the dude had altitude sickness. How the hell was I supposed to know that this random stranger we just met had something to do with it? The next hint is just how bloody often we run into that guy. He's frickin' everywhere. I totally found this annoying, given how f***ing boring he was. I for sure noticed the unusual frequency we would run into him, but I just thought he was some poorly written character who exists to explain the confusing as hell lore in this game. It never occurred to me that he was actually stalking the group and keeping tabs on us. Man, I will never trust an NPC ever again. Now, this third hint is where I start facepalming a little. When the group enters Amberl Tower, they distinctly hear two different voices off in the distance. Upon investigating further, they only find the professor inside. But when he got confronted about this, he was all like, "Oh my god, you heard that? Aw man, I'm so embarrassed." Yep, I totally talk to myself whenever I'm doing research, because it helps me collect my thoughts and shit. This was a pretty obvious lie, but I stupidly overlooked that, and instead was all like, "Duh, yep, that story checks out. Nothing to read into here."
I believe him. Yeah, me too.
You know, I feel like we can all take an important lesson from this guy. When he was pretending to be a nice guy, which is something he's not, he came across as boring and just super unlikable in general. I would cringe and want to walk out of the room every time I saw him.
That fucking guy. Tell me about it.
But once his true sociopathic colors come to light, he is absolutely fascinating. He goes from being the most boring character in the game to being one of the most memorable villains of the entire franchise. In second chapter, something awesome always happens whenever he's around, and it's seriously fun to get a look into that sick, twisted mind of his. So take a memo, boys and girls. Whether you're a good person or a goddamn serial killer, always remember to be yourself. People will like you better for it. Okay, now I gotta admit, my whole theory about Joshua being the crown prince is starting to look pretty unlikely. But those two are still gonna get together, right? Right? Joshua starts explaining the secrets of his past to Estelle. He reveals that he was once a normal, happy little boy, but then one day something happened that broke his heart completely. He forgot how to speak or even how to eat, and no matter how hard his caretaker tried, nothing seemed to help. He grew weaker by the day, and death was slowly approaching. But one day, a traveling magician appeared at their doorstep, claiming he could mend the boy's broken heart. Having exhausted all other options, his caretaker handed the young boy off to the stranger. As the magician tried piecing his broken soul back together, he discovered that he could shape it into anything he wished. And so the boy's new heart became that of a murderer. For over 2 years, the boy was sent out to kill people every single day. Over time, he became more than some mere killer. People called him the Black Fang, and that name struck fear into the hearts of all who heard it. One day, the magician gave him a new assassination order. His target was a man named Cassius Bright. However, the target was too strong. He defeated Joshua with tremendous ease. Having failed in his mission, the magician's servants came out and began beating him to death. His face had been seen, and he was now a loose end that needed to be tied up. But, in a strange twist of fate, Cassius came to his aid and drove the attackers away. After explaining all of this, Joshua tells Estelle he has to leave now. But she cuts him off mid-sentence and proclaims that she is in love with him, and just because he goes away, these feelings won't. He then kisses her, but it was just a trap, and he slipped her a mild sedative. As the sleeping drug took effect, he explained that he has always loved her, and even though he cares so deeply for Estelle, this is goodbye, and he has to leave her side. And that's how the game ends! What the hell, right? I had anticipated a pretty predictable ending, and was planning to stop playing the series by this point. But after getting blindsided by these plot twists, it raised so many questions that I really wanted to know what would happen next. Questions like, is Joshua a villain now? The cover of the next game sure makes it look that way. Which really sucks for me, because he was my strongest party member. Damn it. And just what the hell is the society anyway? A group of assassins or something? Didn't the professor say he was free to leave now? So why go back then? And it left me super worried for Estelle too. As a female myself, I can say for sure that him walking out of her life that way will be a very big ouch. And with that, consider yourself educated and up to speed for everything important in the story so far. Now you are free to start up the Trails series with an actual good game.